Each month, we come forward to discuss, in collaboration with ID mentors, on various trending topics in L&D space. Welcome to Learning, Experience, and Design podcast series, the L.E.A.D podcast series. This is Sandeep Kumar, the founder of LXD Guild Community. Hello. Very good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Welcome to the L.E.A.D podcast series, the Learning, Experience, and Design podcast series. Your one stop shop for insights on the ever evolving world of learning and development. And today, we are diving into an interesting topic: why a systems approach and performance based ID or instructional design is important in workplace learning. So I would like to invite our first guest in this podcast series is Guy W. Wallace.
Thank you
Hello,
for
Guy.
having me.
Yes. An instructional architect and a pioneer in the field of performance improvement with over 4 decades of experience in the field of performance improvement. Since 1979, Guy has worked with a number of Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and nonprofits, helping them improve organizational performance through evidence-based training and performance support solutions. He's the founder of EPPIC Inc., and a leading voice in the world of human performance technology, that is HPT. Guy is also a prolific author, having published numerous books and hundreds of articles on instructional systems design, performance-based learning, and lean training development. So he was awarded the honorary life member status by ISPI in recognition of his outstanding contributions to this profession. Whether through his consulting, writing, or mentoring, Guy continues to shape the field with practical, impactful strategies rooted in real-world application. So we are thrilled to have him here today to share his insights.
Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you. Thank you, Guy, for joining us for this special podcast series. So we have our host for this podcast, Purnima Valiathan. I'd like to start introducing with ID Mentors. ID Mentors is a boutique firm that provides online and classroom training in instructional design, facilitation skills, and e-learning to both individuals and corporates. Purnima Valiathan is the co-founder and creative head of ID Mentors. So, hi Purnima, welcome.
Hi.
So to quickly introduce more about Purnima, I know most of the Indian crowd and yeah, definitely the global instructional designers. They do know Purnima. So she holds the master's degree in education and has been a learning design professional for over 30 years. She has been instrumental in setting up e-learning and instructional design systems and processes in large organizations such as NIIT and Genpact, and startups such as Knowledge Platform. Papers authored by her on e-learning and instructional design have been published by reputed forums, publications such as ASTD and ISPI USA, and Training Journal UK. Purnima is recognized globally as an expert in blended learning. She has recently authored a book on instructional design too. So thank you, Purnima, for being the host for this podcast series, and really an honor to have you both, Guy and Purnima, here on the series. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for that introduction. And Guy, it's an honor and a pleasure to be talking to you. I have been following your work very closely for over 2 decades now, and you have been that invisible guru to me. I have learned a lot from you and your work. So, and I really want to thank you for taking out the time to talk to us and help us spread your knowledge and experience and your insights that you have gained through experience over these 4 decades with the rest of the L&D community, the learning and development community, specifically in India and hopefully if this gains traction in the world. That's what we're hoping for. So, Guy, thank you very much once again for agreeing to do this with us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for including me in this series.
So, without much ado, we'll get started. So, Guy, the first question that I have for you is that you've been a pioneer in the field of performance-based instructional design. Since I think 1979, if I'm not wrong, right? So that's a long journey, and from then to now, has this concept of performance improvement or performance based training or performance based instructional design, whatever you may call it, has an understanding of that concept or the term evolved, or is it the same as it was then? What are your thoughts on that, looking back at your journey?
Yes, thank you. I think, like many of the terminology and the phrases that we use, um, they've not necessarily evolved. Some have, but performance improvement as a concept, as a thing, um, this is an issue that is not unique to that particular phrase. So, performance improvement has meant to some people addressing everything, the systems view, thinking, understanding all of the variables of performance. And I think that that's what the people that promoted performance improvement and human performance technology, the means to the ends of performance improvement, um, wanted it to be as broad as possible to consider all of the variables. But in my 40 some years in this field, performance improvement has also meant just the human being and what it brings, the knowledge and skills, the psychological, the physical, the conceptual, intellectual capabilities of the individual. And to yet others, it's been as narrow as what do people know? What skills do they have? So the awareness, knowledge, and skills. And so it's not necessarily evolved, but what I'm hoping is that people move from looking at things as narrow as just the knowledge and skills to all of the human variables and then to all of the other non human variables in a performance context, because we need to understand that so that we can help our learners, who are really performers, understand their own performance context and deal with those variables, which aren't always stable. And sometimes they're different, sometimes they're missing. And so the appropriate performance response has got to account for all of that. So it's not evolved as much. It may be becoming better known across the profession, but I don't think that there's been a lot of evolution in terms of how people think about that, because it's always been as wide as everything under the sun and then quite narrow to what people know.
Okay, thank you guys. So I think what I hear you saying, I think are two things. One, that, just like every other term, this also seems to have a different definition or explanation in different times and different context, right? So it's not so much as the term evolving as much as people defining and describing it in different ways, right? And the second thing that I heard you say was the way people approach performance improvement in a very narrow way versus how it has to be approached in a broader way. And this brings to mind, right, when I started my career, I was actually, I had a very conflicting understanding of something called teamwork. So we used to have these team building workshops in our organization. We used to go out, for 2, 3 days, and we used to do all kinds of stuff for bonding. Then when we came back, for some reason, the company had individual excellence awards, So I was always, I found it very contradictory in nature that you are taking us for a team building workshop, but then you are celebrating and awarding individual excellence. So, isn't this sending conflicting messages, right? So, for performance improvement, a narrow view is having a workshop, right? But then, are you looking at the culture that you're promoting through these individual excellence awards? So, am I right in that
Yes,
understanding?
And this was going on before I got into the business in 1979. We don't have, because our clients, our stakeholders don't have that kind of systems thinking themselves. They're not looking at how these things work together, or work against each other. And so when we're expecting people to operate as teams, but yet we recognize and reward individual performance, we're sending that mixed message. And that can create conflict in the workplace where people need to work as a team, but instead
Yeah.
now they'll begin to work as individuals competing for whatever recognition and rewards the organization might provide. So
Yes.
it's unfortunate, but that's just something that new people coming into the field need to be aware of. They need to be able to look for those kinds of consistencies and inconsistencies
Correct.
to see whether or not their learning and development products are going to be sufficient in changing performance, because there are other variables such as those.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's so true. So thank you, Guy, for that. And interestingly, the second question, I mean, the answer to the first question is leading me into the second question, which is that you take a very systems approach view to performance improvement and organizational learning. The work that you have done, the frameworks and the models that you have come up with, packed process being one, and the EPPI model being another. So, just for the listeners and the viewers there who may be hearing about PACT and EPPI for the first time, PACT is an acronym for performance driven accelerated performance based accelerated customer driven training, right?
Yeah.
And EPPI is enterprise process performance improvement, right? So which is a systems view to the whole concept of performance improvement and organizational learning and development. So you lay a great emphasis on a systems approach to performance improvement and performance support solutions, right? Why or how do you think it's important for organizations to have a systems view to performance improvement in the workplace?
Yes, I think that this is how I was trained and developed back in 1979. From the very beginning, from the very first day, was I was given several things, and one of them was Robert Mager and Peter Pipe's
Oh yes.
1970 book, Analyzing Performance Problems. And I
Okay.
read it the first night. Family had not caught up to me. I had gone to my first day job after college, and I was given some resources, and I read that book that first evening. And it made great sense to me because it was helping me to understand that learning, what we call training or instruction back in the day, uh, may not be sufficient in addressing the root cause of any problem or opportunity that caused us to receive a request for training or learning services. And it's been necessary to look at all of the other variables. One of the things I was taught on that first week on the job was it's just as important to determine when learning isn't going to have the impact for improving anything. It's just as important to be able to determine that than it is to create stellar, excellent training and development, learning and development, instruction. And because our clients are expecting us to help them improve, and if we give them learning and development products and services and nothing improves, that reflects poorly on us. We should have seen that there's other variables. It's just like the quality movement trying to improve a process when it's not the process itself, it's the incoming materials and supplies that are defective. And so no matter what you do with them, they'll produce a defective product. So you need to go back upstream, so to speak, and find
Yes.
those variables. And then you need to consider the variables in the process itself. So it's really critical that we help our clients improve performance. They may ask for learning and development, but what most of the time, not always, but most of the time, they want performance to improve. Performance in the process, performance in the workflow. Two different words for the same thing, basically. But we need to help clients improve people's ability to perform back on the job. And that should be measured back on the job. not in the classroom or in some learning experience.
Yeah, so it's so important to understand, like you said, the variables. So the way in what comes to my mind is that people, processes, culture, all these are variables that together help an employee to perform his or her job, right? So what you're saying is that what you learned, that it's while it's important to identify what learning is needed, it's equally important to identify when learning is not going to be the solution to that problem. So discovering that, finding that out by looking at all the variables, so basically looking at ourselves not as order takers, like just because a client came and said, oh, we want a learning and development solution, but looking at ourselves as consultants who actually get down and analyze and figure out and recommend to the customer that where is the lacuna, what is it that's stopping an employee from performing, right? And a systems view actually helps you to uncover or discover that, right?
Yes, I think that, this whole issue of being an order taker, well, it's okay to take an order. Now it depends on what is your order fulfillment process. And if that doesn't include systems thinking, looking at the performance of the future learners that you're going to address and the current performers, you need to understand their performance context. You need to take that systems view of that so that you can help your client affect their performance context for their people.
Yes.
This is just really critical, and it's something that, it's not about whether you challenge the client, the requester, because I think that's inappropriate. Nobody
Correct.
that comes to you
Absolutely.
wants to be
Yes.
told, "Are you sure?" Joe Harless, the late Joe Harless in the mid '80s, said,
Huh.
"Don't ever say, are you sure it's a training problem?" He said we should say yes, and then we should help the client through analysis, or what some people call discovery, what is going on in the performance context, the process, the workflow, and what are the variables that need to be there, and are they there adequately? And if not, then you can help your client address some of those things, and we can take care of the knowledge and skill requirements of the performers in those processes, in those workflows.
Yeah, so I think you also shared a very important, piece of advice as, not how to, interact with the customer. I think that was a real gem that you gave there. That's absolutely right. That's what even I have learned over experience of how to handle the customer, how to get them to realize or figure out that we are on the same team and we are trying to improve performance, right? So I think that's a little gem that you put in over there, and very, very, I mean, that's the years of experience speaking, Guy, and very nice. Okay, so now I come to the third question, again connected to this, probably progressing from there, a systems approach. So of late, there has been this whole chatter around this concept called design thinking. And I don't know how it is in the US, but at least in India, almost every company is jumping into that bandwagon of design thinking. And companies are holding training in design thinking for everybody. In fact, even I was called to train some instructional designers in design thinking in instructional design, and I kept racking my brains, and trying to find parallels to the ISD, like we do the instructional systems design. And whatever literature I read about design thinking and the votaries of design thinking, what they say is that design thinking is a human centered approach as against a systems based approach. And having read through all design thinking literature, I just felt that our ISD and our erstwhile ADDIE, is good enough. And why are we bringing in this whole design thinking thing, with a human centered approach? Like, my take on it was that, if you empathize so much with your learner, is it a good thing to empathize that much with your learner or with the employee? Where do you stop? So what is your take on this whole design thinking conversation and debate that's going on?
Well, there's nothing wrong with design thinking itself. I think it's a good concept, but good instructional systems design or good instructional design was always about the human. I mean, if you're going to develop training or instruction, who is it for? It's not for a machine, it's for a human. So if you don't understand what the human needs are, if you don't have empathy for the fact that they are in a performance context and they need to learn how to perform adequately, competently. So it's always been it's not the human in isolation and what they like and what they don't like, because maybe they don't like the job and they should find themselves another job. But if they are going to continue with that job, we have to help them learn to master that job. And so the first thing we need to start with is, yes, there's a human, but there's a performance requirement of that human, and we need to help them learn how to master that. But so we can't think that, so sometimes design thinking, and this is not the first one of these kinds of things that have come up, but ADDIE is often bashed. ADDIE is often attacked.
Yes.
And it's as if we assume that truthfully, millions of people that are practicing ADDIE are doing it exactly the same. We have people practicing ADDIE poorly, and we have people practicing ADDIE at some stellar high quality level. And the goal should be to get people to perform, in their own performance context and perform ADDIE or some other systems kind of approach. Every one of my clients in engineering has their own version of ADDIE. They may call it, instead of analysis, they may have customer requirements, and then they may design a prototype, and then they may test that. But so most companies have some process that helps them figure out on the front end what they should do in the middle and how they will then deploy whatever they've created to meet the requirements of the customer, of the stakeholders, etc. So there again, so if design thinking, the way it's practiced, if it includes looking at what is the work requirements that the people have to, and then what are the incoming knowledge and skills, the fears, the confidences, the competencies of people, how do we take all of that into consideration as we design instructional solutions, learning solutions for people? And that often requires us to create something that's maybe more modularized chunk so that people can skip what they already know or what they don't need. And so that we can't assume that our target audiences are uniform in their prior knowledge. They probably are not. And so therefore, we don't want to train people on things that they already know how to do. And we don't need to train people on things that are not going to be part of their job. They may have the same job title as everybody else, but maybe their performance requirements differ. We need to be looking for what are the requirements and what are the variations across those requirements, and then address that with our systems thinking, with our design thinking.
Yeah. So exactly, Guy, what I hear you saying is that so there are people that use ADDIE very well, and there are people who use ADDIE not so well. And the same will hold true for design thinking also, right? So, and these are just cognitive tools that you have to make your work easier. So it's a human behind using the process or the methodology or the framework, how well the humans understand the context of the situation, how well they look at every variable. So we come back to that, right? So it's not that design thinking per se is bad, or ADDIE is bad, or design thinking is better. It's how we use those frameworks and tools that makes the end goal, or the whether we are able to achieve the end goal well, right?
Yes,
Yeah. So that
exactly.
makes a lot of sense. Okay, and very close to design thinking, my pet, peeve or bugbear is Bloom's taxonomy. So, at least again, in this side of the woods in India, a lot of emphasis is placed on Bloom's taxonomy. So, there is no instructional design training or an L&D training program for beginners, that does not include Bloom's taxonomy. I mean, that has to be there. There's a demand by every customer, every client. And again, it's a great framework, great taxonomy. For the first time, someone structured the whole thinking process. um, And the problem, perhaps, again, I feel is that a lot of people look at it as some kind of a template or a prescriptive framework and don't understand that it's a descriptive framework. It just describes the thinking process. It's something for us to understand. So a lot of emphasis is placed on Bloom's taxonomy, and I feel that takes away from the fact that workplace learning and training is about performance, is about actually doing something. It could be a work output, or it could be an observable behavior, something that you do and not something that you know, and something that so all these learning outcomes with explain, define, describe, you know uh, will that kind of create problems in the solution that we are looking for? So what's your take on that?
Well, again, when I came into the field in 1979, I was given that performance orientation. So I was rooted in that. And I learned about Bloom's later. And I
Uh-huh.
never have used Bloom's. My clients may have wanted me to, but I was able to help them see that if we just focused on performance, that's the ends. Now, there's a lot of means to that ends of people being able to perform competently, and a lot of it has to do with how they think about what their knowledge is, what their awareness is, and what their skills are, and how that all combines in order to be able to enable them to perform on the job. But back in 2002, I think it was, I was on the board of directors for ISPI, the International Society for Performance Improvement. And one of my fellow board members was Brenda Segru.
Mhm.
And Brenda wrote an article about skipping the whole Bloom's approach and just focusing on performance. Well, I really liked her article, and she allowed me to publish it in my quarterly newsletter back then. But if you've got to start with the end in mind, begin with the end in mind. And the end is people are on the payroll to perform tasks which are a means to the ends of producing outputs of value, outputs that meet the stakeholder requirements. That gives us a good outcome versus a poor outcome. We get poor outcomes when our performance and the results of our performance don't meet the stakeholder requirements. So some stakeholders want to focus on the output alone. They don't care about your process. They just want to look at the output. And that's what some regulatory bodies in governments, that's all they're concerned with. Other regulatory bodies or stakeholders are concerned with the process. They don't care what you make. They just want to make sure that you're not violating, you're not handling hazardous waste inappropriately, et cetera. They don't care what you made. They care about the process. And there's other stakeholders that care about both. So we really need to be focused on the performance, the terminal performance, the outputs produced, then the tasks performed, both the behavioral tasks and the cognitive tasks, the thinking that goes along with the behaving, the things that we can see. There's those things that we can't see, like what are they thinking about? What should they be thinking about? Once we understand all of that, then we can basically systematically derive the knowledge and skills, and we can decide how much of the knowledge and skills do they need. Do they really need to be describe it, or they just need to be able to apply it? And so we really need to understand those performance requirements, beginning with the end in mind, and then backward chaining our way all the way up to what are the enabling knowledge and skills. Once we have all of that data assembled, we can decide how we should construct learning and development that will help people perform.
Yeah, so that's the crux. Begin with the end in mind, and you work backwards, right? And then there may be some stuff that you need to know and understand, right, which will help you to perform that task or create that work output. So yes, begin with the end in mind. That should be the mantra, right? Thanks for that. That brings me to the next question, which is, Guy, you are one of those people that who has shared your experience, your knowledge, very generously with the entire L&D community in the whole world. And as I said before, I personally have learned a lot and gained a lot from all the stuff that you put out there, which is open access, accessible to people like me over here, and so and this this I find in an ecosystem where a lot of methodologies and frameworks are proprietary, right? You haven't kind of held on to it or hoarded it. You freely distributed it. So, what is it that motivates you to do that?
In truth, it's because that's the professional organization that I grew up in, which was NSPI back in the day and is now ISPI. The people there, the thought leaders, shared freely, and they never held back. Now, I remember telling somebody, go up to talk to Joe Harless, the late Joe Harless. Now, he passed away back in 2012. But in the 80s and 90s, he was a gruff kind of guy. And if you approached him and asked him for help or advice, he'd say, you got any money? And then 30 seconds later, he would joke and say, no, I'm just kidding. How can I help you? And he would help you. And that was how everybody in that organization acted. They freely shared with others, with new people like myself back in those days. And I remember then back in 1999, after I had authored my first solo book, Lean ISD, and I'd been working on this book since 1983. So in 99, I finally published it, and I called up one of those gurus that I had worked with and had met originally through ISPI, was Gary Rumler, the late Gary Rumler. And I asked him, how am I ever going to repay you? Because I credited you with where I learned analysis from, performance analysis. And I said, if you don't like what I've put in my book, I'll take it out. And he asked me to come down and visit him. And so I spent 2 days with him, and he was reviewing it and giving me a little bit of feedback. And at one point I said, how am I ever going to repay you for everything that you've done for me? And he was writing on a whiteboard, and he stopped and he looked at me and he said, you can't. And then he went back to writing because he was joking with me. And he turned to me again and he said, you're going to have to do what I had to do. I couldn't repay my mentors back either. All you can do is pay it forward. Now, I'd already been doing that, but then I kind of doubled and tripled my efforts with doing that. And as I got closer to my retirement, I decided to share even more. So while I have books that are for sale, I have books that are free, I have articles that are free, I have videos that I've done that I've offered for free. And my goal, my mission before I retired and now that I have retired is to help learning and development leaders and practitioners become more performance-based or performance-focused or there's, again, we have all this language that's kind of sloppy, but I want to help people in the way that I was helped. And so that's part of what I was motivating. Now, we've had myself and my business partners, back when I had business partners, the first 20 years of my 40-some years in the business, we got complaints from our competitors that we gave away too much. We'd go to conferences and we'd give away the store. We'd write books and it'd have all this detail in it, and people complained to us. And I remember my business partner, the late Ray Svensson, saying, look, maybe 60% of the people are going to be part of our target audience. There's 20% that have no clue as to what we're talking about, and they'll never ask us for help. There's 20% in the audience who might come and ask us for help, and as consultants that we're selling help. And so what we do resonates with them. Oh, I'm sorry, the 20% can do it without us. Now that we've given them everything here, the 20% don't have a clue as to what we're talking about. 20% will say, yes, I can do that. And they will go do it without us. We've given it away. But the 60% in the middle are our target audience. They get it. They don't have time or the capabilities to do what we've shared with them. And so they might hire us. And so that was part of our driver. It was better than giving a business card away. We'd give a slide deck away with all the details so that you too could go back home and try it yourself. And if you need help, give us a call. Or if you see that this is something that you might want to employ, then you can call us in and we'll help do a project, we'll help develop your staff, etc., whatever. I was surprised when I first went to work with Ray Svensson in that when clients asked, that thing you did with us, that project, can you have our staff learn that from you? And he said yes. And so I had done these projects, and all of a sudden, back in 1983, I was training our clients in the methodologies that I was using in my projects. And I think I do that because I was encouraged to do that by others. I know there's a lot of people who have businesses and so they can't give away their intellectual property. And that's a business philosophy. And I think that the philosophy of some is to freely share. And they're not in it just to build their business bigger or whatever. They're in there to serve their clients and serve the community of instructional designers or learning practitioners.
Yeah, that's so, that's so nice. Because I guess even I have had mentors who've been like that. And, so you learn from them and you also do the same. And when I say mentors, even mentors such as you living in another continent, I learn from you. And then I also feel like paying it forward, sharing freely. And especially the part you said about instead of giving away your business card, you give away your slide decks so that, people can use it and learn from it. Right. And both coexist, some may be wanting to develop a business and keeping it proprietary, and then some there. So I guess I started my career as a teacher. So I guess I'm a teacher at heart. So, I can't stop myself from sharing. If I get some knowledge, I'm excited about it and I want to share it. Right. Yeah. So that's absolutely right, Guy. Now we come to the last question, and something that all of us, and especially I would say the ones who are starting off, the ones who've just entered the job market, the intermediate practicing professionals, they are looking at a world with where artificial intelligence is hovering over their heads, looming large. And there's all this chatter that AI will take away their jobs, AI will be a better teacher, a better trainer than human beings are, and entry level jobs are getting lesser and lesser. So there's this whole fear around and apprehension about artificial intelligence. How do you see that? I mean, do you see it as merely as a tool, like we've been using tools all along to augment our work processes, for productivity, or do you see it really taking away, a lot of work from us? What is your take on that?
Well, I'm pretty sure that we don't know for
Hmm.
sure how it's going to end up. But my guess is that artificial intelligence will be just a better, faster, and cheaper tool for us to use in doing our work, administrating our work, deploying our work, just like computers back in the 70s and 80s did that, and then search engines helped us with that. So, will it be able to do the whole thing without any human interactions? And that's possibly true at some point in the future. But if that's 50 years in the future, then we shouldn't worry about it today. Um, so, a friend of mine, Dr. Richard E. Clark, professor emeritus from Southern California University, Dick Clark, has been working on cognitive task analysis for 30 years. And they have been working on using artificial intelligence to conduct cognitive task analysis. Now, cognitive tasks, the thinking tasks, are the covert tasks. We can't see them. We can ask
Hmm.
people about them. And what we've learned is what they tell us is partial or wrong. And so we have a need to determine how should people think about the work that they're doing before they do it, as they do it, and after they do it, before they go on to their next step. And so artificial intelligence has that capability of speeding up the process and making it uh, less cost so that hopefully we'll begin to do that, because too often learning and development does not include how to think about what you're doing. It may teach you how to do things to produce things, but if it's not teaching you how to think about the performance context, are all the variables there? I mean, what if it's different than last time? How should my performance response be the same, or should it be different? And how should it be different? And if we don't include that kind of help in our learning that we provide people, then they're going to have to figure it out on their own. They're going to have to use informal learning and social learning instead of formal learning. So I think that at some point, he believes, he and I had a conversation about this a few weeks ago, that at some point artificial intelligence may be able to conduct the analysis efforts, determine what are the behavioral tasks that we can see, we can count, we can measure, what are the thinking tasks that people need to have in parallel with those behavioral tasks. And then it can take the data that's generated and construct a design and then do the development. And hopefully humans are involved in looking at it at various stages to see that's correct, or I don't like that, or I want it different, or change the color, or we're going to call that something else in the future. So artificial intelligence may not be able to do it all, even eventually. It'll need some human interaction to make sure that what artificial intelligence is producing is accurate, complete, and appropriate. Now, will someday other artificial intelligence be able to determine whether something is accurate, complete, and appropriate? Probably. I mean, how many decades out into the future that is, I don't know. And we have issues with what AI is producing right now has hallucinations, creates errors and such. And so there's a need for humans right now to double check. Someday, artificial intelligence tools will do the double checking, perhaps. But until we are darned assured that we are producing quality content that helps people perform, that has the accuracy it needs, that has the completeness that it needs, and is appropriate in the context of the learners, we don't know. So I think that we should see this as a tool. We should learn how artificial intelligence is being used in our current enterprise, and when and where is it being used. And we should be kind of on that bleeding edge of determining where can it be used. And we should be doing testing, formal testing, controlled testing to see whether or not we're really getting quality outputs from it, and where the humans might need to intervene at certain points to ensure that quality, to ensure that the quality, quantity, and cost is there, so that what we produce is better, faster, and cheaper, and we're not producing garbage that needs to be reworked and reworked and reworked at huge costs for misinforming people, misinstructing people, helping people learn the wrong things. I mean, so there's a huge role for humans to play in this, but we need to look at it as a tool that will help us, will enable us to do our own work better, faster, and cheaper. But it's not there yet. But you can see the promise of it.
Yeah. So, absolutely right. We can only guess now. And in the near future, the human oversight will be needed, definitely. And the third point that you made, that it tells you how to do things, the procedural, mechanical stuff, but it doesn't tell you how you think and arrive at a response or an output or an answer. That's still with the human being. So, at least for the near future, and the rest, as they say, we'll have to wait and watch how it pans out. But at the moment, in the near future, I guess the human oversight will still be needed, right? So, Guy, thank you so much for an enriching and enlightening conversation. You touched upon so many things, from performance improvement, systems approach, to the importance of beginning with the end in mind and paying it forward, and closing with the despite artificial intelligence, how humans will continue, at least in the near future, to play an important role in making sure that the output is good and not garbage. So thank you very much for sparing your time for this podcast, and we hope to continue learning from you in future for a long time to come.
Again,
So,
thank you for inviting me.
our pleasure completely,
Yes.
Guy. Over to you, Sandeep.
So I would say complete, appropriate, and accurate. Thank you, Guy and Purnima, for great insights on systems approach and performance-based ID in workplace learning. This is the beginning of great minds in instructional designing joining us on the Lead podcast series powered by ID Mentors to share practical and impactful strategies. So stay tuned, listeners, for more insights on learning and development. There is a quick news which I would like to share. to all the learning designers, L&D professionals, and lifelong learners. On November 8th of this year, the LXD Guild is bringing India's largest gathering of instructional designers, Learning Without Limits. India Conference in Delhi, and you don't want to miss. So mark your calendars for November 8th at Delhi. So register now on www.lxdguild.com and be part of something extraordinary because the future of learning isn't coming, it's being designed right here. So until next time, keep learning and keep growing. Thank you.